Dave here, how are you? Just recently I restored an old cypress pine slab table that I'd built it about 20 years ago, and as you can see by the pictures, it's been through a lot of weather. It's lived outside probably 18 years of its life. The last couple of years my wife has decided that she would use it as a workbench. I'll show you how I did it. First thing I did was bring it over to my workshop and then undo the 6 screws that were holding it to the base. Pulled it all apart, sat it on this bench, got the track saw out and cut the edge off each board. That let me set the table saw up. I think I set it up to about 220 millimeters, ran the boards through the table saw, and you can see all the rubbish that came off. It's on the floor. The reason I did all that right at the beginning, there was a lot of dirt and grit, and I didn't want to run that through my thickness planer. It will pull all of that dirt and rubbish up through the blades. Didn't want that to happen. Talking about the planer, that was the next thing to do. Barry wants to come in and give me a hand here. So he comes in, says hello. Next thing I'm doing, I'm putting all of the timber through the plane on one face to start, stack it on the bench, flip it all over, and go again. On the other side, bring all the timber back over to the bench and have a look at it and decide how I'm going to rebuild this top, whether I'm going to put every board in the same position and the same face up or not. Well, as it was, there was a large rot section in one end of one of the outside boards, so I flipped that board over longitudinally, put it on the table as I wanted it to end up, clamped it together just to check how my glue joints were going to look when it was finished. I was happy with them. They looked pretty good. I marked each board 1, 2, 3 and 4 for the reason of identifying them as I start to glue up. Next thing to do was to pull it all apart, clamp each board down one at a time, get the domino out and put the mortises in for the domino tenons to go into assembly time. You'll notice here that I wasn't too fussed about where they were going. I even let one of the mortises go straight down the center of where an old dowel was. It's not going to concern me. The dowels only went in an inch. These guys are going in about 2 inches, and the dominoes were wider than the dowels were in the first place anyway. So it's going to get a good grip. No dust with this machine. I love it. The glue up, all I do with the glue up is I put the 4 clamps down on the bench to start, put all the boards up on their edge, glue it, drive the dominoes in, drop the board down, pull it up, do the same with the next ones, clamp it, and that's it. Leave it for, as long as you need. I try to leave it overnight. Whilst they're drying, I've got a leech in here who's wanting to attack me, and the other side of nature with my property is a king parrot, and he likes to sit on my shoulder and hang out with me. So there you go. He's not mine, he's a wild bird. These are all wild birds, but they are kind of tame on this property. Next thing to do is we remove all of the clamps and get a sharp chisel and take off all of the beads of glue on the top. I flip the whole tabletop over and I work on the base of the table. Now all I'm going to do here is knock the glue off, and then I'm going to go around and I'm going to fill with epoxy resin. Now I use slithers of cypress that I have from other parts, but they're only about 2 millimeters thick, and I use super glue and I glue them to the edge to act as a dam. So if I've got a large chunk missing out of the side of one of the slabs on the edge, I just pop this on and then I fill it up with epoxy resin. Now you'll notice I didn't use any sawdust this time in the epoxy because I was looking for a little bit of a different look, just a bit of a white plastic appearance, as was a nice contrast with the cypress pine. I like it. That's why I did it. Once I've got the tabletop turned up the right way again, I'm going to repeat the process that I did on the underside. I'm going to look around, epoxy all of the loose knots, epoxy all of the holes that are in it, fill up the tops of the outside if it needs to be done. Next thing, I'm going to get the plane out and I'm just going to knock the bulk of the epoxy off before I get the Rotex out to sand it. Okay. Now that I've got the epoxy sanded off, I can get the track saw out and cut both sides of the table. Dress the edges up, and these little guys will get cut off at that stage, and any of the epoxy that's out the side will get cut off. I'll go in a mil or two just to take me back to some nice substantial timber. Then on the ends, I'll set my roofing square up, set the track so I'm dead square on either end, and take maybe 10 millimeters off each end of the tabletop as well. I'm going to use the little trimmer here with a 8mm round over cutter in it, go right the way around the outside, and then get the block plane, and I'm going to go all the way around underneath with the block plane just to take the arrows off. Now I can sand the whole top. So I'll sand it, and then I'll sand it with 80 grit. I can have a look at it and say, right, well, I've got some depressions in the epoxy, because sometimes as you put epoxy in, it will sink down a little bit if there's a bit of an air bubble underneath it. Maybe it'll just settle down. And you don't really see that while you're going for it in a place that looks like a leopard. So I get the chisel out and I'll knock out some little spots, keys a couple of spots for the epoxy to get a hold. Go over it again with the 80 grit once the epoxy's dried, and then I'm right to go all the way down to 180. So I go 80, 120, then 180 grit paper. Then also what I do is I get the interface pad. And now I put the interface pad on the little ETS, the 6-inch sander, and with the soft pad. Now that allows me to use the sander to go over the edges without worrying about creating any flat spots. Works well. Now you'll notice in the middle of the table there's a hole, and that's where an umbrella used to be when this was when the table was an outside table for, barbecues and picnics. So I thought, well, it's not going to be used for that anymore, so I need to plug that. So I grabbed the trimmer again and put a rebate cutter in it. Notice I said rebate, not rabbit. I put a rebate around the hole, and then I had to make a plug for it. Now, I found a little bit of cypress lying around on the block that I'd made a gate out of many, many years ago, and it was leaning against the wall and it was rotten. I'll show you a picture at the bottom of it. I took one piece off that, trimmed it down to the right width, to the same diameter as the hole that I had there now, and then I thicknessed it through the thickness planer down to 10 millimeters, which was exactly the depth I had to go to, and then I made up a little jig for my belt and disc sander, and the disc sander gave me this beautiful finished round plug, and I'll show you here tapping it in. It's a great fit, went in perfectly. So if you want to know how I did that, there's another video. If you click the link just here, you can have a look at it. Sand that little bit down as well, and next thing I have to do is apply the wax. The wax I used has triple E powder in it. Now triple E powder is also like a cut and polish, and that's the reason I didn't go any further than 180 grit with the paper, because the triple E powder was going to do the rest. This is included in this triple E wood turners and restorers wax. I guess that's why they call it triple E, E for triple E. Pretty cluey. I didn't even work that out until a couple of days ago. Now I applied it with a rag, and I wore gloves for it. I applied it with a soft cotton rag. Make sure you don't put too much on. Go sparingly, put less on if you need more than more. So went over the whole table, and it went really dull, and then I used Velai's pads on the Rotex. I tried using it on the ETS, but it was going to be too much work. So I put it on the Rotex, put it in geared mode, and I really leant on it and went over the whole table, and there was areas where I put too much wax on and the machine bogged down, which was nothing would happen, and all of a sudden it'd get the heat up in the wax, and it'd start to melt, and then it just started gliding again and distributed the wax even better. And you can see for yourself how well it came up. Put the screws back in, and hey presto, I've got a beautiful top. The underside I have not touched, because that was not what's going to happen on that day. I might even make a whole new table base for it, whole new set of legs and what have you. But for the moment, it's going back over to my wife's workshop, and she's going to enjoy it. If you like what I'm doing, why not subscribe to the channel? And also, you could tune into What's in Arthur's Toolbox. That's another show that I do, and it's about my great-grandfather's tools and his workbench. It's all of the tools he used as a carriage builder, and I inherited the lot. They weren't split up amongst the family, they are all here. And it's fascinating, some of the tools that we have a look at. And I'll put a link in the box down the bottom here, just in the description box, as well as a link to my Facebook page if you're interested. And keep coming back. Tell your friends, hit the like button. See you next time. Bye.